Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, the Secretary-Treasurer of the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local-3000 in Washington State, Joe Mizrahi. Joe, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so Joe, you guys last week, was it March? Maybe it wasn't even last week. Last week, endorsed Uncommitted in the Washington State primary. It's happening in a week. Walk us through who did the, but before we get there, why don't you tell us just a little bit about the UFCW Local-3000. It's the biggest union in the state.
Correct. Yeah, we're the biggest union in the state. We're also the biggest UFCW local in the U.S. So we represent about 55,000 workers across Washington, part of Idaho, and part of Oregon.
And how did you guys decide, like, what was the process in which you made this endorsement?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I could take a step back, we were one of the first local unions in the country to endorse a ceasefire and push for that. And then, brought a lot of other labor folks along with that call. And then, over the last months since then, we've seen obviously a disappointing response from the Biden administration on that issue. Simultaneously, but not totally disconnected, we've seen some alarming poll numbers, and we've been worried about Biden's viability in the general election. So we pulled our board together, which is 48 rank and file workers, work in the grocery industry, healthcare industry, and just kind of kicked off this conversation with our board about what we should do in the Washington primary. And I was surprised. It was a unanimous recommendation. It was also not, it was a challenging conversation, but not as challenging as you would think. People got there pretty quickly on why this was an important priority.
All right. So if I hear you correctly, there's two elements to this. One is to help Biden's viability. I want to get to that in a second, but let's take the first. Why is the union calling for a ceasefire? Let's talk about that part about it. Like, where is it in unionism that, you guys are supposed to just negotiate with the local hotel or whatever it is? Why you make an endorsement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally core to unionism. The whole idea of a union is moving beyond the individualistic, moving towards collective power. And I think that, we can't only care about workers within our jurisdiction, within our borders. We have to care about workers worldwide. And we also have members who are deeply impacted by this. We have Yasmin, who works at a grocery store. She's one of our board members. She's a Muslim American. She was saying when she got her primary ballot, she cried. She's always voted, but she felt like no one on the ballot actually cared about her and her community. So having this uncommitted option, she was so happy about that.
All right, let's talk about the other part. I mean, because it seems to me there's got to be some measure of dilemma. We follow a lot of like the unionization stuff. I mean, Joe Biden, there's always more that can be done to help unions and unionization efforts. But at least in my lifetime, I don't think we've had a better National Labor Relations Board. Certainly not a better general counsel. We have an administration, Biden shows up and walks with the UAW. I mean, this is a guy who is, relatively speaking, particularly, past administrations, and certainly relative to Trump, favorable to unions. Like, walk us through the thought process in terms of like, the dilemma there, but also how you guys perceive this as being helpful to Biden, ultimately long run, maybe.
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to that. I mean, one is everything you're saying is totally true. Biden, we said it 1,000 times, he's the best labor president in our lifetime now. Like, that's a pretty low bar, admittedly, unfortunately. But it's all true. Now, one of the things about that, though, is that almost everything Biden's done has been through board appointments, through great actions by the NLRB, through executive orders. And we know that one of the challenging things about that is it doesn't build permanent infrastructure for workers. It's something that Trump could undo on week one in office. And we know that in part because a lot of the bad things that Trump did for labor, Biden undid in week one in office, right? So, we feel like it's part of our core responsibility to protect that great labor legacy that Biden is leaving by making sure that he or another Democrat is reelected. So that's the first part. The second part is what you were saying. We think that having a robust primary debate, having these conversations now in the primary, will ultimately make Joe Biden a better general election candidate should he get the nomination. We saw, tens of thousands of voters register in Michigan to vote uncommitted. And these are voters who, on the Washington ballot, it's only the primary. It's only the presidential primary. So we're talking to voters who would not otherwise vote in the primary, and we're engaging them. We're talking about issues. Ultimately, I think a lot of those voters will vote for Joe Biden if he's the nominee, and his whole campaign will be stronger for it.
Have you guys gotten any pushback from the other Washington or other from the Democratic Party? I mean, you said you were a little bit surprised on how quickly you were able to coalesce around this idea on your board. Did somebody get a phone call like, how can you guys do this? This is horrible. Is there any sense that there's any pushback to this?
We were getting those phone calls immediately, right away. Absolutely. I mean, people are very worried that by doing this, we will somehow be weakening Biden, that we need to circle the wagons, that, he's our guy and we need to be fully committed to him. I just don't buy that argument. And I also think that it's dismissive of the real concerns that workers have right now. But those calls came right away.
How have Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, the two senators representing the state of Washington, have they reacted? Have they responded?
They have not responded to us, and I know that they are supporters of Biden. But I will say that they have not also reached out to us and said, "How dare you do this?" either. So they've been pretty neutral with us on it.
What's happening outside of Washington State? Well, I guess before we get there, what are you guys doing? How much you made this endorsement? Are you doing stuff on the ground to build momentum around this? And if so, what?
Yeah, there's a broader Washington uncommitted campaign that is mostly, generating from the ceasefire community. So we are linked up with them. We're helping them. We're helping provide infrastructure for that campaign. But internally, we spend most of our time talking to our own members. When you have 50,000 members, it's a lot of voters to talk to. So we're reaching out to our membership about the uncommitted vote. And I would say that when we're talking about pushback from DC that we've gotten, we have not seen that same level of pushback from our members. Similar to our board, our members are very receptive to that message. And I think many of them will vote when they otherwise wouldn't have. I think outside of Washington State, I know that we're lucky in Washington State that we actually have uncommitted as an option on our ballot, which isn't true in every state. So some folks, you have to go through the process of writing it in. But I know that there are other states like Colorado where non-committed is an option, where they're pursuing similar campaigns.
Are you guys, as the biggest local of the United Food and Commercial Workers in the country, are you guys? I mean, do you confer with other chapters across the country? Is there talk with the national office? Are you guys organizing outside of the state in any way?
Yeah, we have allies with other locals across the country. We're having those conversations, and not just within the UFCW. We're talking with other like-minded local unions from internationals across the country. I would say our national organization, I don't think is at this stage on the uncommitted train, and we were a bit rogue in our decision. But each local, because it's a statewide primary, has autonomy to do that.
Do you anticipate any big announcements that we think we'll be hearing in the next couple of days about that?
No.
And let me ask you this, just lastly, just a little bit, do you feel like, when you're out there saying that, a lot of these people are going to vote for Biden anyway, do you think it provides leverage? I mean, I think there are some people who are skeptical of that, despite the fact that there's a lot of people who don't want you to do it, which is a good indication that it has some help. I mean, it's providing something, how do you navigate that question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's hard on the ceasefire thing. I think we've already just seen in the last few weeks that there's been more movement since Michigan from the Biden administration on the ceasefire front. I saw, Vice President Harris said something. They've committed to more aid. It's not enough, but I think we've seen some movement. And I don't know that the uncommitted campaign, what percent of credit for that the uncommitted campaign can take, but I think that every little bit of pressure helps. On the viability point, I mean, I do think that a growing chorus of questions will hopefully make the Biden campaign, get the candidate out there, campaign harder, make the case against Trump. And so I do think that, every little bit will help.
Joe Mizrahi, Secretary Treasurer of the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 3000. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and appreciate the endorsement for Uncommitted out there. I hope it does have the impact that we hope it does.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.